It's one thing to hear violence on the street, and another to live it. I've seen South LA go through bad times. None were at the level of those 5 days. The sham trial had caused the people to understandably rise in outrage, and stepping out into the dark alley behind our apartment with my baby brother after our own mother had nearly killed us. It was like going from an inferno into a living hell. It was just past noon on that second day of the riots. There were tons of people, raiding storefronts, stopping cars to loot passers-by, and even some fighting one another. They were marching and going against the riot police, a force of white uniformed soldiers that were excessively violent in trying to quench the crowd. These tactics that were uncalled for, and only ignited it even more. But with each pushback, the crowd screamed louder. I squeezed Keldon close to me and kept my head down, trying to move amid the boisterous neighbors. I knew at any moment someone could pull a gun, a knife, or even worse, the police could begin to use force to take us down. It was madness. People were stepping on one another, getting trampled, pushing and shoving. The noise was so loud. I heard helicopters overhead. I knew it was the media trying to catch a glimpse of everything. I ran up to an officer, tugging his shirt sleeve to get his attention, but he shoved me away. In fact, he turned away, giving me this look I'll never forget. Like we were pieces of garbage to him. It made me so sick to think that the police were the people I thought we could turn to for help. They were supposed to be the ones who would protect and serve, yet in the midst of this terrifying danger with my mama, we were left alone and met with silence. She had changed from a loving woman to a monster in mere moments, and we had no one to help, no one who cared. The police were the ones using tear gas, batons, and shields. They were actively harassing the rioters. They weren't trying to promote peace, they were trying to promote chaos. Every move was making things worse. Who were we supposed to turn to for help with Mama? It felt impossible to even imagine that we could make it to Naomi's alive. Halfway down the street, the police officer shoved us down, and Keldon hit his head against the pavement. Surprisingly, he didn't bleed, but it was a bad bruise. I dropped down and started to call for help, but no one listened. No one seemed to care. "Ashley, Keldon!" a voice said from the crowd. I looked amid the chaos and saw a familiar face, Jamal. He ran with some of the gangs in the neighborhood, and Mama told us to steer clear of him, since he did who knows what in the streets. But this time, as he rushed over to our side, I took his hand and stood up, checking Keldon again before saying, "We need to get to my auntie's house." Jamal heard gunfire from the direction we had just come and took us by the hand. Thankfully, he didn't ask questions. He just guided us down the alleyway that he had just appeared from. "Stay close. You should have never gone anywhere without me or my boys. Out here, all we got is each other," he advised us as we ducked into the next block. More rioters were here, smashing up cars and burning what little was left to destroy in the streets. The police were actively attacking the rioters and inciting more violence. It was madness, and I knew what drove it. Inequality, despair, hate, and anger. Jamal had the same fire in his eyes, but he kept his focus and moved towards the fire exit. "You gotta go through here," he told me. Keldon was quiet and almost out of it, mesmerized by experiences we were going through, either in shock or just paralyzed by fear. I had to keep him close as we pushed through the dilapidated old building in the next street block. Here it was quiet, and a quick check of the signs told me that we were almost there. Jamal shoved us towards the next crossroads and muttered, "Y'all should take cover with your auntie for a while. Don't be coming back out here. You might wind up like them." Not far from us, I saw a few people that looked like they had been trampled by the protesters. I swallowed a gulp of air. "What about you?" Keldon finally asked, as we got to the steps of Auntie Naomi's flat. I turned to Jamal expectantly to see if maybe he was going to stay. Jamal shrugged and said to us, "We finna protect you, and everyone else from those crooked cops in the system." I could see the gleam of his Glock on his belt, and I knew that he intended to join the anarchy the moment we were safe. "Come on, let's get inside," I told my baby brother, watching as Jamal ran towards the sound of the riots. It was past 4 o'clock, and we stepped towards the voice box for the flat, pushing for the operator to call Auntie. I still couldn't believe we were doing this, but I knew that there wasn't much else left to save Mama. Auntie Naomi answered the door and looked at us in shock. "What are you two doing out in this mess?" I couldn't help but break down in tears and fall into her arms. She hurried us inside her home, her television blaring and some rice cooking on the stove. Once I took a moment to regain composure, I told her everything that had happened, starting with Aloha. I'll never forget the look on her face as I explained in detail how Mama had been acting. My aunt is a strong woman. Her and Mama had been through a lot back in the day. But I could tell she had never heard of such a story like the one I gave her. She was frightened. Still, it was worrisome as I kept looking out towards the streets. "Aloha, do you have it?" she asked. I shook my head no. "Without it, we are doomed. The spirit can control others. It has a hold on your mother until we can destroy it. It can move from soul to soul as long as the Loa is intact," Naomi warned. She did her best not to show it, though, and told us both to relax as she finished dinner. Kelden was fidgety, not even bothering to sit down. He was acting a bit odd, staring at the corner of the wall in silence, but I knew that when he was little, he would always stare at the ground in silence when he was frightened. Still, it was worrisome as I kept looking out towards the streets. She called the police, though, to warn them about our Mama, and the officer on the line claimed that he would come by that evening, but we never saw anyone. Instead, it seemed like outside things were getting worse. Most of the protesting had gone a few blocks over, but I could still hear it. I didn't feel safe, especially with how Naomi was acting. She kept touching her own idol, praying to it for protection. I could hardly understand how one was safe and the other was evil, but I guess it didn't matter right then. And then as we all sat down for a meal, we heard it. The low, guttural shriek from down the road. I literally jumped from my chair. Naomi instantly told us to make sure the windows were closed. I recognized the scream. It was Mama. Had she followed us here? It was almost dark. A few of the street lights gave the gloomy roads of Los Angeles the ethereal glow about them as I snuck a peek between the blinds. I could see Mama's silhouette as she moved down the street alone and feral. She wasn't moving the way a person should. It was like watching a marionette doll on strings. Every few feet, her body buckled forward, and she gave another shriek. Was she calling to us? "What do we do?" I asked, my hands trembling. "Turn down the lights." "Stay quiet," Naomi ordered us. From a block over, we heard the sound of police sirens approaching. Mama stopped under the streetlight, her eyes gleaming like blinding pearls as the would-be attackers approached. There were 5 of them total, but it was clear from the way she was acting they wouldn't stand a chance. One of them wielded a baton. Several had guns, taunting her with it. But she hardly even blinked. She rushed towards them, grabbing them with long fingernails as she shoved him to the pavement. Another tried to grab her off of him, but she was too quick. She spun around quickly, and I saw what looked like a black tar spew out of her mouth. The man screamed in agony as his face began to melt. A bullet grazed her shoulder, but she hardly noticed. A few others hastily pulled their weapons. More tasers and guns. I held my breath, terrified of what might happen if she was hurt. I knew she wasn't herself, but I was also more frightened than ever that we might lose her right then and there. She stood up and leapt towards the first man, shoving him against the light pole. He made a sound like she had just broken his spine, and she twisted his gun towards the second man. The first bullet split his skull apart, and the second tore through his abdomen. One man sliced at her stomach, but it made no difference. Not even the pain stopped her. Naomi and Kelden and I watched between the blinds in stunned silence as she finished off the others. Her teeth gripped at her final attacker, shredding his face as she attacked like a wild dog. She was a monster. And these pathetic officers were just prey. When he fell to the side of his comrades, Mama was staring down at him like he was fresh meat. But then her gaze turned towards the flat. She made eye contact with us. I'll never forget that look. It reminds me of those surreal nightmares that were too scary to be true. When you pinch yourself and you realize it was all a dream, this wasn't a dream. It was reality. Naomi instantly pulled us away from the window. "Get in the basement, now," she ordered. We didn't argue with the orders, and we fled. Down in her cellar, it was musty and dark, and we held our noses as she slammed the door behind us and bolted it shut. We were alone. I listened as Mama slammed her body against the front door. "Naomi!" she screamed at the top of her lungs in a visceral, guttural tone. I held Keldon close and looked through the cellar peephole. Naomi was grabbing her charms and beads and starting to chant. It sounded like something she would sing to us as children in a Cajun dialect, but she was grabbing her herbs from her kitchen and sprinkling them on the floor as Mama kept trying to get in. She was hoping her own idol would protect her from whatever controlled Mama. "You shall not enter here, foul spirit," she shouted to her sister. Mama made the bizarre, gurgling sound, and behind me I heard Keldon catch his breath. Then the door smashed open and I saw her come in, the feral wild woman, ready to attack Naomi. Our aunt tossed the herbs into her face and scurried towards the kitchen, chanting louder and louder and louder as Mama's body jerked and seized up. I held my breath now as well, thinking for a moment that it would work. Then I saw Mama lurch forward and push Naomi to the wall out of sight. What followed sounded like pure hell. Our auntie screamed at the top of her lungs. She begged to God. She even begged to the devil, I think. I saw her arms flail and her legs twitch, and I heard the gnashing of teeth and the sound of bones breaking, and then her body went still. Mama stood up, and she had completely collapsed Naomi's chest cavity, and all we could hear was the faint whimper of our aunt's breathing as she struggled to stay alive. And then this monster looked towards the basement where we hid. "I need my children!" the demon screamed. I pushed away, and I screamed for Keldon to follow me out the back. We ran into the night. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video. Or listening to tonight's podcast on the podcast, if you're listening to that there at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you could happen to listen to podcasts. I wanted to remind you guys also that my wife sells loose leaf tea at etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. She has different teas, including Creepypasta teas, and you can get a Mr. Creepypasta tea. If you ask for a dabbing sticker, she also has those. And of course, I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who checks out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta and supports the show, keeps the light on, gives me treats for my now 2 cats, both Hylas and Hercules. Both of them are a handful. And especially a big thank you to Saha, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Mazikeen, Ken Lando Higuchi, Chompski, Nico kaeo, Tristain Pelton, Stephen VanHuss, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, G. Weevil 3, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Hades' Nephew, Carter Barenfanger, Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Wayne Deckard, Bradney Leipe, The Government Monitoring System, Anne Charron, rumblefox, AcidSystem, Mike Bullock, Rafael Rodriguez, Dan Sweet, Mad Marstomp, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Sean Mills, Brian Arce, Cryptic Nightmares, Shadow Morningstar, Somber Puppet, Brianna Wright, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Bad Honey, S-Man, Kiri the Sloth, Patrick Schoolmeister, Thomas Burgett, Barbara Maceo, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, The Homeless Bird 93, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, and Corey X Kenshin. A big thank you to all of you guys and everybody down there in the description. I really can't thank you guys enough for supporting the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody who listens, sweet dreams.